I have a fundamental problem with assuming that because you love your business and you think it's amazing and whatever, that one of your kids would necessarily have the same degree of passion and desire to join that industry. So I think that I would set out with a view to, if Michael wanted to take over this business, fantastic, but I think I've learnt that you want to see your children succeed in the area that they want to succeed in. So to have that obligation to take over a business because it's the right thing to do, I don't think that, in this day and age, I don't think that's the right way to think.
In this episode, I'm joined by father-son duo Michael and Trevor Back. Every father wants to provide the best life opportunities to their son, and Trevor definitely wanted Michael to run the business and to succeed. Michael didn't want to, and Michael ended up having a very successful consulting career and consulted to his father on how he can actually have a successful succession, which he has done. This is an amazing story, and it shows and indicates the value of strong communication, keeping the family sacrosanct, and ensuring that education is what is important in providing a legacy, not just financial wealth. Hope you enjoy. Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the It's Never About Money podcast. I'm joined by father-son duo Trevor and Michael Back. For many different reasons, I'm excited to have them both on. Definitely resonate with the idea that father and son have to negotiate and talk about family matters, business matters, and really think what's best for themselves. So I'll start with just how you are both. It's been a little bit of time since we organised to get together. So how are you both?
Yeah, going well, Joe. Thank you. It's great to be on with you today, and I'm looking forward to see where this takes us.
Yeah, I reckon Trev's probably going better than me at the moment, from the sense of, since we last spoke, he has retired. So he's up in nooses. The first time he's worn a collared shirt in months. And unfortunately I can't say the same. But yeah, in the scheme of things, nothing to complain about. Everything's great.
So we've got a retirement with potentially an impending look at what we will do going forward. Trevor and Michael, I know that you work in a consultancy business, human to human, a very apt name. Can you please explain what that is all about?
Yeah, so I think pretty early on in my business life, I realized how important relationships are, whether it's your relationships with your clients, your relationships with your team, your relationships with the market, that ultimately the success, and not just success, but the joy in business comes from the strength of your relationships. So I've been fortunate to have worked in the financial advice industry for over 15 years now. And my path has really taken me to a place where I've started my own business, and I help financial advisors and their teams to build better relationships with the most important people in their business.
So I would imagine the most important people in their business would be both obviously the staff, but also their interactions with clients. Is that a large part of
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, originally I subscribed to sayings that we always hear, like the customer's always right, and we're a client first business. But what I've since realized is that no business in the entire world has delivered a great client experience unless the team are happy. So while the whole client first mentality sounds good in theory, I actually think it's impossible to be successful and to deliver a great client experience unless the team are put first. So it's team first, and clients are a very close second.
Wow. Okay. So is that actually the way the process is handled when you'd overhaul a business? You actually go in and have a look at the team structure and the team unity and how everyone relates, and then go out?
Yep, that's exactly right. So do a bit of a diagnosis, and often it's really about starting from a place of defining what is important to the team and how they choose to show up. And often when a business is small, these things go without saying. So people will start and they'll hire people that are the same as them. And you don't really need to define what we'd call the culture, because it just exists and we all kind of understand it. But as a business grows and you hire more and more people and that message hasn't been as clear, you soon start to see almost a two-speed culture in a business where some people are performing really well and some are just kind of going through the motions. And a lot of the time business owners don't know how to address that. So the very first thing we have to do is look at the culture. Most of my work isn't actually asking the CEO what they think's happening. I'll speak to team members from all across a business to find out what they think, and we start to paint a pretty vivid picture of what is and isn't working. And without getting on top of that, all of the other stuff isn't going to work.
Yeah. Well, I know, Trevor, there is a number of connections with your son other than blood. Mm-hmm. And one of them is the fact that your journey is was in consulting as well. But I also note that you've had a property business and just recently sold it and transitioned out of that, just this month. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey in business?
Yeah, I started my career, Joe, in banking, actually, in finance, sales and finance in banking. And I left that profession in 1996 and went out, and I was pretty lost for 6 months, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I then moved. I thought it's quite interesting what Michael's just described, because it's pretty much what I went through with my consulting business, which I had for 10 years. And it was all really about that client experience. What I like about what Michael just described is exactly what he did in our business. We joined one of the franchise groups in real estate 5 years ago, and that was my 5-year retirement plan. And one of the things that Michael did was come in and put the systems and the processes in place he's just talked about in order to deliver the perfect client experience. And we're pretty proud of what we achieved. And without Michael's perseverance, because as a small business, you get caught up in the day-to-day and you don't really get a chance to step back and have a look at the systems and the processes and the things that are actually going to help you deliver that client experience. So it's a bit ironic in some ways that Michael's gone down a path that I went down probably about 15 years ago. And it's probably fair to say that some of the stuff that I talked about constantly at home, day and night, has rubbed off on him a bit. And it's nice to hear that he actually listened and he learnt from those experiences, because he's an amazing guy to have on your team in your business, and we wouldn't have been where we were at the end of our 5-year journey in real estate unless it was for Michael.
So him listening in on your consultancy business in the early years has lent itself to him coming back, Michael coming back and actually assisting you as a consultant to your business, which has actually realised every, I suppose, business owner's dream to be able to successfully transition out of their business. And when we say successful, we think about that the business is still operational, it's functional, doing what it needs to do, and that the exiting owner as well has a financial pathway and a lifestyle pathway as well.
Oh, yeah, I think it's important. I mean, I think everyone wants to leave a legacy of some description. And when you actually retire and you sell your business, it's nice to know that it's a really strong business, it's growing, that the staff are happy, the clients are happy. I mean, I'll give you an example of when we started on the journey with Michael, he said, you've got to focus on your Google reviews. And we went, Google reviews? Seriously? What good are they to you? And anyway, the staff were like, oh, yeah, I was, Google reviews, I'm not sure about them. Cut a long story short, we now have almost 470 5-star Google reviews. I don't know any real estate agent in the country that has that. And the amount of business and the amount of goodwill and the amount of client satisfaction that comes from those Google reviews is incredible. So without Michael's perseverance, we wouldn't have really focused on that. We probably would have focused on something that didn't bring in as much income and revenue as the Google reviews do.
So with respect to the property business itself, can you give us a little bit more detail around the nuance of that business? Is it is it a traditional real estate business? How is it different in your mind?
Yeah, it was a typical real estate business in that we did both sales and property management. Yeah. We focused really on building our rent roll, because in real estate, that's your asset. When you sell a real estate business, there's no value applied to the sales side of the business. Because obviously if you have a strong salesperson and they walk to the real estate agent down the road after you sell, that revenue's gone. So when you sell your real estate business, you really sell your rent roll, and it's sold on net income and a multiplier. So the more managements that you have in your rent roll and the higher management fees that you have, obviously the more your business is worth. So, yeah, we deliberately focused. I mean, I was a selling principal, so I actually did all the sales in the agency, but we really focused on building strong client relationships in order to build our rent roll. And the amount of referrals that we got from existing happy clients was incredible. And that's how we were so successful in building that rent roll.
What did you love about it, and what you probably could have left aside? Trevor?
I like sales. I like the thrill of the hunt. But I also really love looking after people, and I love building things. Michael knows this story that in another life I would have probably made fine furniture or built things from scratch from a piece of wood. So I love building things. So I really loved building the business. But once we got it to a certain point, and I suppose retirement was looming, I probably thought, I've done this now, I've built this business and I've got it to where it is, but I don't know if I've got the energy to spend another 5 years taking it to the next level. So it was time to hand it over.
I'll definitely circle back to furniture, because that's an interesting, maybe it's in the next phase as well, a little bit more of that, because you've probably got a little bit more time on your hands. So
I'm so glad you just said that, because I literally just went, as soon as this episode is finished, I'm going to message Dad and say, you should start building furniture in your retirement. Why not? Now's the time.
100%.
Maybe I should start working for you, Michael, and get even with you.
No, I wouldn't.
Are you sure you want to?
Yeah.
Let's discuss this.
Yeah.
Let's negotiate.
No, I look at the things I did
guys,
to you, Dad, when you were my client, and I wouldn't want that level of intensity in my business.
When you were my client, I love it. So when I think about your story, there is obviously the father-son dynamic that completely I resonate with. I mean, obviously my path with my late father is very different, but I do remember, I always say we had this idea of financial planning in the blood. Like, we would sit around the dinner table, and by osmosis, by observation, by conversation, a lot of my conversations with my father was around what he would be doing at work, whether in academia and financial planning, or just through his private clients. And so by the time I got to university, I had a really strong hold on what it kind of took, at least from I think from a kind of more macro point of view. And, I'm really interested in Michael discovering with you a little bit about what you learnt around the family dinner table, and were there any stories of the way Dad sort of kind of indoctrinated you into the world of business and consulting?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, because as Dad just mentioned, he has had multiple chapters of his career, and that there was a banking training one, then there was a consulting one, then there was a property one. And, there's actually management rights before the property one. So, notwithstanding you working at the brewer and the meat works and the post office and all these other chapters, but in terms of like your significant career, you've probably had 4 distinctly different chapters. And so it wasn't like one of those chapters necessarily infiltrated my brain, but I definitely think that sense of business and entrepreneurship has always been something that it's just been like my oxygen. I've just only ever known it. So, when you were talking before about the fact that my journey isn't actually that dissimilar to where Dad is now, it was never a conscious thing. It wasn't like I went, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, and Dad was doing this, so I may as well just do that, which I think is a lot of people's paths. It was probably a bit more subconscious, but also I just think that I always knew that I would start a business. And I've always loved business. And that's because, from a young age, I used to sit next to Dad on the couch while he was reviewing training videos for an American consulting firm that he used to work with. And he'd be like getting all the training in his brain so he could then go deliver it on the other side of the world the next week. And I loved hanging out with Dad, and I found the business interesting. So I'd just sit next to him on the couch and watch those videos. And, even now I still impersonate some of the things that we heard during that, or I still throw some of like the catchphrases around. I still use some of the tools that I learned when I was 15 years of age in meetings with clients. Like, the stuff was epic. But I think the biggest gift of that time in my childhood was probably twofold. Firstly, it was seeing the power of business and how it can make a really positive difference to people. And I could see the difference that Dad was making to people. And so that was something that I always wanted to achieve as well. But the other thing was seeing my dad back himself and have a crack. He wound up his consultancy in, I think it was 2006. And he didn't have anything else to go to. He knew that he wanted to get into property, but he had absolutely no idea how to do that. And instead of what some people would do, which is, have this gentle path where they kind of ease out of one and ease into the other, Dad just went, well, I know this isn't right for me, so I'm just going to call it. And I'm going to sit through that discomfort for a bit while I work out the next steps. And those steps were probably quite painful for Dad, I think, in a lot of ways, because he loves clarity and direction. But just seeing what he managed to create on the back of that and the legacy he has created through his property business, I think has really given me a sense of backing yourself and enjoying that adventure and not craving certainty, and realizing that whatever you have in your mind, you can create if you apply yourself to it.
That's an amazing observation. I think that's very true. I think about the times that I'm most proud when I reflect on my behaviors and my actions, and it's when I feel like I'm authentically being myself, but at the same time I can see that it is pretty much precisely the way that my father would have acted. It's that two things. That's when I'm super proud, and I get most nostalgic when I'm doing something and I felt that, wow, that was really me, and at the same time that was really Dad, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'm glad that we got to have that conversation. It was a very big part of what I wanted to discuss with you. I also know there was something to do with the financial review that your dad used to impose on you.
Yeah, he used to just get me to read out articles. So he'd hand me the financial review and ask me to read the articles to him, and then that was the easy bit. The hard bit was, so what do you think that means? What do you think they mean by that? No, it was like this, some people sit down and do the Sydney Morning Herald trivia quiz on a Saturday. I did the Trevor Back financial review quiz multiple times a week.
Wow.
But I think that was probably part of my financial education too. And so, I hope the ATO aren't listening, or, whoever the regulator is of this. But, Dad was buying shares for me when I was a kid. I'd be like, I want to buy this one. And I'd save up a bit of money and he'd buy it for me. And I've always had a real comfort level with finances in the financial world. And it was totally because of that.
Now, we've skirted around the edges of this, but obviously, Trevor, Michael has come in and helped you from the point of view of the consulting to your business. Was there ever an idea or a view that, from a succession planning point of view, that Michael would actually come in as a potential owner of your property business? And how did that all go down?
Well, as Michael's just described, Joe, he has had a thirst for business knowledge as long as I can remember. He was a good student. He listened very attentively, and he learned a lot during that process. And when he came into our new business to help us it was actually interesting. The father-son relationship changed when Michael came into our business, and he was one of our service providers. And it had to change. We had to have a lot of difficult conversations about things that were going on in the business that needed to be changed. And I felt like saying to him at times, just rack off, mate, I'll pay you, and just move on, because I'm not going to change. So we in the very early ages, we had to split the father-son relationship into a business relationship. And I think that's really important, because I have a saying that in business, there's no room for emotion. You have to be pragmatic, and you have to do what's right for your staff and what's right for your clients and what's right for your business. And sometimes those things are quite hard. So Michael, once we established those ground rules about, the business relationship, it made it a lot easier. And I was more likely to listen to him as a business coach and as a business consultant than as my son. Because, dads always know better than the sons, right?
Well, it must be very challenging to take those hats off and kind of be able to, it would require a bit of self-reflection.
Yeah, it was, because I mean sometimes you have to have those difficult conversations, and Michael was very good at putting me back in my box when I needed to be put back in, and I didn't take offence at that because that was our business relationship. And I think the other important thing was that outside of business, we never ever talk business. We re-established that father-son relationship on weekends and nights and going out to dinner and having a beer together. We never talk business. So business was business, pleasure was pleasure, and family was family. So,
was there a time where where there was a connection through business where you couldn't really potentially converse on other matters as much? Has there ever been that sort of dynamic? Because I know of many family businesses that I've been in touch with where father and son have a connection over business, but really struggle outside of the business to have shared interests and things to talk about, which, it's not unusual.
I wouldn't say...
I think that we had a very tight unit to start with, and Michael's mum and I and Michael, we are a very tight unit. So we've spent lots of time together. We've travelled together. We hang out together. We love hanging out with each other. We always have. So I think that part of the relationship was established, the personal relationship. So we had that ability to separate our personal relationship and business. I think the harder thing was, as a father, having your child tell you how to run your business or make suggestions on how to run your business. And because it comes back to what I said a minute ago, that, we always think because we're the elder statesperson that we know best. Well, we don't know best. And, people with young ideas, young thinking can always add value. The other thing I'll say, Joe, is that when I recruited my team, I only recruited young people. I didn't want these crusty old real estate people that drag you down. So I deliberately recruited young people. And I think what happened as part of that, building that culture that we had in our business, and also, getting people to focus on the client experience, I think Michael's age and the age of my team, they were pretty much the same. So I think that helped a lot with them listening to suggestions that Michael made. And when they took them on board and implemented them, I thought, oh, this is great. This is what my team want. Because at the end of the day, as Michael said earlier, they're the ones that have to deliver the client experience.
What about you, Michael? Any observations on the conversations and how they may have evolved over time?
I was just imagining, if we'd started working together now, Dad might be doing TikTok dances. So, gosh, sliding doors, hey? You're lucky you got him before that. I think the way I saw my relationship with the business, I don't think I've ever shared this with Dad, is I think Seth Godin's one of my favorite bloggers and thought leaders in the world. And he always says that if you walk past a burning house that's on fire, you just go in and help. You don't question if you're the most equipped/experienced person to put out that fire. And there was absolutely no fires whatsoever going on in Trev's business, but I just always saw my ability to help Dad as, I've never done real estate before. I've never worked in this industry, but the unique things that I had were I knew so intimately what Dad was trying to create from a feeling and a client experience and a personal point of view, because I sat through 10,000 hours of videotapes that made me know how Dad thought. And not just videotapes, Dad was like the OG of working from home. He worked from home in the early 2000s. No one worked from home then. And so I would be on school holidays just listening to all these coaching calls. So I literally knew exactly how Dad thought when it came to business. So I had that unique ability. Yeah, a lot of coaches are trying to build the business they want, not the one their client wants. I didn't have that problem, but I think that the double-edged sword of being a father-son is that I know in some ways when I give Dad advice or feedback, it probably annoys him more than if someone else did, because there is that personal relationship. It's not purely business. It feels a little bit personal. And so, there were some phone calls Dad and I had which didn't end very well. I'll be really honest, because sometimes I probably just hit that nerve where it felt more personal than business. But then by the same token, I also know that Dad trusts me probably way more than any other business coach you bring in, because he trusts me so much as a person that I also, going back to my analogy about I was the person there and the building was on fire. I didn't question. I just went, well, I'm probably the only person who can do this right now, so I'm just going to do it. So it was really great to know that I had that privileged position where I had Dad's ear, and it wasn't always going to be easy, but I knew that at the end of the day, I was perfectly placed to help him create what he wanted to create. But yeah, it wasn't always easy. And going back to what you were saying about finding that balance, you're also dealing with Dad who was working 6.5 days a week, and me working, not that much, but still working more than 5 days a week, probably 5.5 to 6, that when we do catch up personally, like there's not that much else to talk about because work is such a big part of your life. So I've personally found it really hard to find that balance of personal and professional because so much of my life is dominated by work, and the same was true for Dad. But also, as we kind of touched on at the start, business is a really important part of who I am, and it's a really important part of who Dad is. So it's not like an unpleasant thing to talk about. Sometimes it was. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, Dad, how'd you go with that? He's like, mate, I don't want to talk about, I can't even think about this right now. And you go, okay, cool, I'm going to back off. But other times you're sitting at a really nice restaurant in Sydney talking about work, but you're enjoying it because we love work. So that could be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes, you go, you have 5 minutes of that chat and you go, all right, Mum's bored to tears here. Why are we doing this? Let's go back to being a family. So yeah, I found that really challenging, to be honest.
So I've kind of coined it with you guys before, and you kind of smirked when I called it the perfect failed succession. In the sense that we've kind of talked around the idea that Michael's skills have come back to assist yourself, Trevor, in transitioning out of the business, but that was always your intention, but in a different way, right? So when you first started, your intention was to have Michael actually operate and work in the business, as many fathers want for their sons, because I imagine that part of it is rite of passage and in helping them out in their life. So tell us a little bit about your plans for succession originally and how it didn't quite work out the way you wanted.
Yeah, it's a good question, because when I set up this business, I thought, this is my 5-year plan, right? So after 5 years, I think it'll be time to exit stage left. And I sort of mooted to Michael probably within the first 12 months or so of potentially, because I like to go on holiday. So I sort of thought, well, when I go on holidays, Michael can come down and run the business for me, and it'll give him an opportunity to learn the business. And we did go on holidays, and Michael did come and run the business, but I don't think he really liked what he saw. So I think that I was trying to through the back door, get Michael involved in the business to a point that he might say to me, Dad, I really like this business and I'd really like to take it over, and I'll be your succession plan in 5 years' time. It didn't quite happen that way. He was basically saying, after we came back from holiday and he went back to Brisbane and I went back into the business, he was basically saying, look, you've got a really good business, but it's really not for me. It's not where I see myself long term. And I was a little bit taken aback by that. But then I sort of thought, well, you know what? If he doesn't particularly want to take over this business, I've got another way forward. I can get him involved in the business by bringing him in as a service provider, and then he still might get to know the business better and want to take it over in a few years' time.
Can I ask Trevor like just to take that snapshot in time where you're delivered the news, or you've been observing the fact that Michael doesn't want to go into the business? Why do you feel taken aback by that, as an example? Is it as a result of the fact that your plans in your mind have now had to shift and you're having to change things on the fly because you've always thought that was the kind of course? Or is it more that you're actually thinking about Michael and wanting to make sure that his career is actually moving in the right direction for the benefit of him? Or is it some combination of both? What makes a father, get alarmed by a son's rejection of an offer that's too good to refuse in your mind?
I think that I suppose in my mind, I sort of had a financial benefit as well. So I sort of thought, if I build this for 5 years and Michael comes in and takes it over, there's going to be a strong business here, and financially Michael will benefit from that. what became very clear was that Michael wasn't terribly interested in the industry, but he also wasn't really interested in, taking something that I'd spent 5 years of my life building from a financial point of view. So he wasn't, industry-wise, it wasn't really what he wanted, and he didn't probably really want to think that, well, I don't want Dad to build this business for 5 years and then I walk in and take it over and get the benefit of all the hard work. I want to see him get the benefit of the hard work and sell the business and retire and move on. So I think, does that answer your question, Joe? Because I think that...
I think it does.
I feel like if you're in Queensland, you would have had a much better shot, but... I made all the moves to get out of the rat race to go back to it. It'd have to be an offer too good to refuse.
Yeah.
So you were surprised, Trevor, when he didn't want to take over the business?
Yeah, I was surprised. I don't know if I was surprised, but I was, as I said earlier, I was taken aback a little bit that I thought it would have been a natural thing for him to say, you know what, I think this is a great idea, Dad, that, I'll shadow you for a couple of years and then take over your business. But he was going off in a different direction and building his own business and his own life. So I sort of was taken aback to start with, but then I sort of thought, you know what? I just want him to be happy and I want him to do what he wants to do, and I don't want to force him to take over a business that he doesn't have any interest in. And I think probably also that, I come from a country town, and I think I mentioned this to you guys before, that which was a very heavy farming community, and it was just a given that every son would take over the farm. They'd go off to boarding school, they'd go to university, they'd come back and they'd take over from Dad on the farm. And Dad had taken over from the grandfather, and the grandfather had taken over from the great-grandfather. But what we started to see as I left the country and came to the city is that those people didn't want to do that anymore, and they were actually saying to their parents, I don't want to work on the farm. I don't want to take over the farm business. The life's too lonely. Yes. It's too hard. There's droughts, there's floods. And so we started to see that shift. So I think in the back of my mind that I was more prepared for that, because I think it was a trend where traditionally people would take over the family business. I think that's changed, and I think it's been changing for quite a few years.
And I think for some good reason as well. I mean, the idea that, so obviously there's two components here. There's the financial transition of a business, and so there's a transfer of a legacy from that point of view. But there's also the transfer of a legacy in very much the way you have, in terms of the providing the know-how, the education of how to run a business, of how to create your own wealth. And fundamentally, as I've spoken to with Matt Heine from Net Wealth and the Heine family, the important aspect of generational transfer is not necessarily the financial, but the how.
Absolutely.
And that's what you guys have in spades through what you've just discussed with me.
And it's that legacy, isn't it? I come back, everyone wants to leave a legacy. And if the legacy that I leave is that Michael's taken on board some of those business lessons. And as I said earlier, he's had a thirst for business for as long as he could breathe, I think, probably because he was indoctrinated into that from listening to me. But I think he's going to make a much better business person long term and run an extremely, and he does run an extremely successful business now based on those fundamentals. And I think you need fundamentals in everything in life, and business fundamentals are essential.
Yeah. And Michael, do you think it was important? Why was it important for you not to take on this business in a traditional sense? I mean, it must have been, you might say no, but I would imagine that there would have been some trepidation around saying no.
Yeah, look, absolute sliding doors moment for Trevor and I, like 2011, might have been 2012. I was a paraplanner, which for those of you who don't know what a paraplanner is, they're people who sit and write financial plans all day. And for 5% of paraplanners, it's their calling, and for 95%, it's soul destroying. I was in the 95%, and I was at a real quarter life crisis. I was at an absolute crossroads where I was like, I wanted to be a financial planner. I'm now doing this paraplanning thing. I don't like this at all, but I have no idea what to do. And at that same time, I think Dad saw an opportunity for his business. And at the time, it was a different business. It was still in property. He had a business partner. He saw a significant opportunity that business wasn't growing the way it should. So he was probably thinking, this would benefit from a bit of Michael's injection. But also, I think he just wanted to take away my pain and remove all that uncertainty and go, I'll give you a clear direction. And so we actually sat down, Dad and his business partner and I, and worked out whether I could join the business. And that even extended to me catching up one-on-one with the business partner to kind of suss me out and see what I'd bring and see what I thought was possible. And that didn't end up playing out. The business partner just wasn't comfortable having, I suppose, two backs in a partnership of three, which I can completely understand that. But had that have played out differently, I mean, I probably would have gone down that path. I probably would have found joy in that path. I probably wouldn't have moved to Queensland. And yeah, my life would be drastically different. So to answer your question of why when the second opportunity was there to join forces with Dad and I didn't jump at it, I think by that stage, I'd had two significant moments in my life where I'd understood that there was a path for me that felt right. And I didn't know what it looked like, but taking those lessons that Dad had given me from a kid of backing yourself and believing in yourself, I'd done that twice. One was when I moved to Brisbane with absolutely no certainty. I had a 3-month gig to get a conference off the ground. And at the end of that conference, there was either a business or there was nothing. But either way, I kind of just burned the bridges of my life in Sydney and gave it a crack. And it worked really, really well. And all of a sudden there was a business. And that was like that moment where I went, I've seen Dad do this for years, just back himself, but now I've done it and it's worked so well. And then I've created this wonderful life in Queensland. So I'd had that experience, and then I'd had the next experience of leaving that business, starting my own, going through all that uncertainty, but it working really well as well. That I think by that stage, I'd really accepted the importance of listening to your gut and backing yourself and not kind of living someone else's version of success, but believing in your own. And so when Dad said to me, and it wasn't necessarily so direct, but when he was kind of insinuating, would you be interested in taking over this? This would be a great business. You can make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. It never felt like a 3 out of 10 in terms of excitement, but it felt like a 7 out of 10. But by that stage, I'd made a decision that I'm only going to do things that are a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in terms of excitement. So I think in many ways, the lessons Dad had taught me when I was a kid are why I said no to that, because I'd seen how well things play out when you do back yourself.
I have a feeling, regardless of whether you chose to get into the property business and give it a go or do what you did, that you would have landed on your feet given the way that you approach things from a mindset point of view. And I reflect on that because it's definitely not all about me, but I think about, again, my story, and I think about the fact that it was a completely different scenario in the sense that my dad was ill. He was sick. He wasn't long for the world, and I needed to come in. You talk about the fire in the building. I was young, but I felt like I was the one that needed to come in and kind of help Dad. But also, I think Dad felt, because I was so young as well, that would shore up my future. And because he wasn't sure how things would go, there was kind of a lot of pressure. And so I took on this business that I had no idea whether I loved or I loathed or I didn't. And so for a period of time, there was just this kind of adjustment phase where I'm like, do I really like this? And how do I do this? And then what I recognized in myself is the ability to self-reflect, be able to grow and to change the nature of what I do to serve me, and make sure that I'm happy in the business. And of course, not negotiably, my clients are happy too. And so I've been able to do that through mindset shifts and creating a niche business over time. But it may be a traditional financial planning model without the podcasts and all the other creative stuff that I do may not have been a good fit for me. So it's just interesting the way this all works. And I'm happy to say it seems like Michael and Joe and Trevor are definitely standing upright now and enjoying things.
I think that's Absolutely. A really good point because I think there's some people like I got a guy that I grew up with. His name's Clancy Flexman. So shout out to Clancy if he's listening. I haven't chat. Yeah, I know it's a good last name. Yeah, he should.
Personal trainer. Yeah.
I haven't chatted to Clancy Flexman in probably 25 years. But when he was 5, he knew that he wanted to drive diggers. And I saw on Facebook recently that he runs a very successful digger company. Now, there are some people in the world who from a very young age know exactly what they want to do and they just do it and they're very happy. But I reckon most people aren't like that. And certainly I wasn't like that. I never had that vision of what is my career. And I completely resonate with what you're saying, Joe, that I have found my groove and found joy in financial advice by bringing my passions and strengths to a corner of that industry. But yeah, if it had been property, if it had been osteopathy, if it had been cafes, I probably would have found that same groove. It's just a different playground that I'm playing in. And yeah, I think it's probably an important lesson for a lot of people is that if you're not kind of enjoying what you're doing, sometimes it's not about the environment as much as what you're bringing to that environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, completely agree. Coming back to the family side of things and the dynamics, I'm interested in the how you've managed the relationship where disagreement and conflict arises in both a business and a personal context. Has that been a challenge over time?
I think sometimes you have to agree to disagree. It's not about winning. It's not about like, oh, Michael won that point and I'll win the next one, and because that's not healthy. I think it's about sometimes agreeing to disagree, but at the same time, you know that it's all for the benefit of your team and your business, and behaviour change is not easy, and sometimes you don't realise that you have to change your behaviour to get the results that you want. And I think that it's not. You can't win. You can't go in with the mindset that you're going to win every point, because you're not. And I think that you have to have that mutual respect that we'll agree to disagree on this, and that's what's held us in good stead, I think, Mike.
Mm. Yeah, I think the posture of the relationship's always been important to me, that I don't make decisions and I don't tell Dad what to do. It's his business. He's got to decide, but I just want to make sure he's got the right inputs in the decisions he's making. And yeah, I've seen this with my own clients, that when you work with a client and they're just saying, oh, I don't know what to, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It's actually often those relationships don't work that well, because they're not truly buying it. They just want someone to do something. They're not taking control and ownership over what they're responsible for. So in the case of Dad, I think a lot of conflict was avoided by the fact that there was never a power struggle, because I always went, well, it's Dad's business and I'm going to give him the right inputs. I also think what was a useful reframe for me was, most of the time when I caught up with Dad, I could tell that he didn't want to be talking to me. And that's a weird thing to say. And I could tell that if I'd have said 5 minutes into a lot of calls, look, let's not talk about work today. Let's just have fun and connect personally. He would have gone, oh, thank God, that's so nice. I just want to hear how your trip was, blah, blah, blah. But what I also knew is that a lot of business owners get too caught in the business and not enough on it. And the most valuable thing I could do in that hour was force Dad to turn away from his inbox and stop thinking about that, vendor that he's selling the property for, or that inquiry he got on domain for someone who wants to book an open. Forget all of that just for an hour and actually just create a little bubble in his business where he can focus on really important, high-level strategic priorities.
So you're deliberately triggering Dad for the benefit of him taking note of working on the business, when in some ways he wants to kind of like, I'm sure Trevor sort of like, just let me go sort of thing. So in that same way, you're trying to protect the relationship that you have, so that when you catch up after hours, there's no frustration or animosity that kind of builds over. How does that, I know it's hard to describe, but it might be worth exploring how you could describe that in that dynamic.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I literally had to get comfortable with the fact that the first 40 minutes of the meeting would be not overly productive, because I could tell that I was hurting Dad's brain. But there'd become this moment about 20 minutes before the end where he just let go and just go, all right, I'm in. I've changed my focus now. I'm onto this. And we'd make rapid fire decisions, and we'd like just bounce things around, and we'd always come out of it with something productive. So I think a lot of that for me was not taking it personally that Dad didn't want to speak to me, because I knew that it didn't mean he didn't think I had value to bring. He just didn't want to talk to me because he found pausing in the business, focusing on the business challenging. And I knew that's exactly why I needed to push hard, because
Did you observe that in him, or did Trevor, did you actually tell Michael this?
No, it would have been an observation.
Yeah, it was an observation.
It was an observation.
Yeah.
Because once again, that's a behaviour, as I was saying about behaviour change before, that I didn't even realise I was doing that, but Michael was astute enough to realise that until he got through that point, I wasn't going to listen, really. My mind was somewhere else.
Exactly,
so,
yeah. And there's always this trade-off that I see most business owners make, and I do it myself. You go, once this is out of the way, then I'll be ready to think about that. But that moment never comes. There's always something that is a legitimate reason to not focus on your business. But so you actually just need to break that cycle and just trust the process enough to go, I'm going to keep showing up even when I think that it's not going to be valuable, because this is always going to be valuable. And most of the time, I'd say when Dad and I caught up, it was.
I think what helped that process, Joe, was that I got to a point that I wouldn't take the calls in the office. I'd go and sit in the park.
Yes, that was a big one.
I'd remove myself physically from the office environment. So over time, when Michael was calling at 10 o'clock, I'd be sitting in the park ready to take the call. So that I was totally focused on what we're there to talk about, and not, as Michael said, looking at the inbox, listening to all the chatter in the background in the office, going to the front desk because there's a sales opportunity. Totally not there mentally, but go and sit in the park and listen to the birds. Well, that was different.
So you're in operational mode, and then Michael is trying to trigger you into strategic mode, and the physical environment itself is not conducive to you thinking strategically, because your patterns and your addictive kind of, operational behaviors are completely at play.
Absolutely. Good.
That makes a lot of sense, like when I think about, as an example, and I love you, Mum, when Mum calls me when I'm in the middle of work, and I'll answer because I'm like, I want to make sure, everything's okay, but then she just wants to have a kind of chin wag. It's like, I can't be present. And so often I'll just wait, and then I'll go outside or go for a bit of a walk, and then have a conversation with her. It's much more fruitful and nice.
Yeah.
It's just that in matching the environment to the actual conversation, which is something you forget.
Very important. Very important.
Yeah, I'd say to I suppose directly address your question about how we created structures to separate the work and the personal and not let one bleed into the other. I very much treated Trev like a client. So we had set meeting times. He didn't receive this process because it's a relatively new one, but I have an email that one of my team sends to every client before a meeting, which is checking in to work out what they want to focus on for the session. And had we been working together when that was launched, you would have got that process, and I would have encourage you to reschedule the meeting if you didn't have time to fill out. Like, all of the boundaries I have with my clients, I didn't move them for Trev. He was treated like a client, and that extends to the team as well, that I engaged with his team at the same level as I'd engage with any of my client teams. So I think the way I showed up to that and didn't take it for granted or have any complacency around, doesn't matter if I'm a bit late to this meeting, or I can reschedule it if I get busy, or things like that. I think that was important in Dad taking that coaching as seriously as he did as well.
Bit of a change of pace. Trevor, did you set around, because I know you've just transitioned out of work now, and did you set around planning what you would do when you would leave? I know that a large percentage of business owners tend to have their whole lives associated with the business, and were you worried a little bit about, are you worried about your sense of worth and contribution being tied to that business?
Not at all. I think that when you're in business, as long as I was, that you're constantly driven day in and day out by that business, and you live and breathe it, and you think about it the whole time, and you're always there. I have an ability, which is, Michael understands this, that once I make a decision, like, for example, if I go on holiday, I'm crazily trying to get out of that business to go on holiday. The minute I get on the plane, I don't think about that business again for another month, because I've got an amazing team of people behind me that are more than capable of running that business when I'm not there and stepping up and making decisions. So I've always had that ability to shut off. In terms of retirement, people go, what are you going to do in retirement? You'll get bored. Like, you'll last 5 minutes and you'll be back working. And I'm going, you don't know me. You don't understand that once I get to that point, I don't need to have a plan. I've been planning all of my life, business planning and personal planning. In retirement, I don't need a plan at the moment. I just want to chill out for 6 months and then work out what I'm going to do. But I think what I'm going to do, Joe, I think I'm going to go work for Michael and then give him some of his own back. I'll keep him on his toes.
We're not hiring at the moment. Sorry, send us your resume,
hiring.
but yeah, we're not hiring at the moment.
I thought there was a skills shortage Australia-wide, Michael. I thought everyone was looking for employees.
Not a human to human. We've escaped that one.
I'm only joking.
I'm super interested, guys, in this topic, because I have a feeling that I'm exactly the same as you, Trevor. When I disconnect, I can really disconnect, and it doesn't mean that I don't love what I do. It's just I just have this ability, and I know others that simply are always tied to their emails, and they just find it really hard. I know part of it has kind of been mooted or explained through your willingness to change, to move on a next phase that might be unnerving. You don't hold on to things with but both hands very tightly. You can kind of maneuver and change. I wonder what makes it possible to just be able to disconnect like that.
I think that I haven't always been like this, by the way. I mean, years and years ago, I probably wouldn't take a holiday because I wouldn't leave the business. But I thought if I don't start to put the systems and the processes. See, I have a philosophy in business that the people are extremely important. That goes without saying. But we systematized our business about 5 years ago. So our business was chaotic. It was like there was no systems, there was no procedures. Well, there were, but they were very loose and they weren't being followed. And I quickly learnt that in order for you to get away from your business and to be able to go away and not even think about it, your business needs to be systematised. So the systems are more important than the people. I don't mean that literally. But if you've got a business that runs on systems and processes, you can go away and the systems and the processes take over and run your business. It's pretty much, it's the same with staff. Like if someone goes out sick or someone's on holiday for a month, I want them to go away and have a holiday and not have to worry about their job. And the only way you can do that is to have a systematised business. So
what you're saying is that the business itself, you had the confidence that the business itself could actually run itself. And so it was easier to take that step into the mindset shift around, okay, I don't need to necessarily be attending my full mind to this business while I'm away.
I think, and I think a lot of small business owners think that they are the business and the business won't operate without them. And I think when you get to a point that your business is humming along and it's running, like a well-oiled machine, I think you then can step back and go, you know what, I can go away for a month now and not even have to worry about the business.
So it's kind of like, do you want your sense of pride to be around the fact that you as an individual are integral to the business? Or do you want your sense of pride to be around the fact that you were able to create a business that doesn't require you?
The latter, absolutely. And the more that I got into being able to get my staff to run the business and get them involved in the decision-making process, that's what freed me up. So you don't start out in business thinking that way. You start, but probably in the last 2 or 3 years, and a lot of it had to do with in systematizing and putting systems and processes in place in the business. A lot of it had to do with also the support that Michael brought to the business. He helped us with those systems and processes that made so that we could get to the point where I could just walk away and let the business run itself.
Michael, have you ever observed anything from Dad's transition that you think you take with you into your next transition?
I think this exact point is there's so much of this that's resonating with me right now, particularly for my own business, which there is a relatively strong key person dependency. And so I'm probably the before case that Trev is now the after case of in many ways. I saw one of my client businesses recently. There was a guy who started off wanting to be an advisor, and it became very, very clear soon that he was just an ops manager. Like he had general manager written all over him. So methodical and process driven, but he had this sense of, well, I want to help people. And he's recently decided he's going to give up the advice bit and double down on the ops management. And the big thing for him there was that he realized that he can still have that same impact on people. They're just not people out in the world who need help with their finances. They're people inside his team who he's helping grow and improve and making their life better. And so I think at the end of the day, like there's probably a bit of ego tied up in both. There's a genuine altruism, but it makes you feel good. You know, I think nature has rigged it that way that we can help the people around us and feel good at the same time, and that's great. But one of those definitely serves you more than the other. The ego that you get from empowering your team to deliver a great client experience empowers you to be able to take time off and go on a holiday guilt-free, whereas the alternative to that can become a little bit exhausting, and it can hold you back in your personal life a little bit. So I'm inspired by the fact that Dad has done that, and that was definitely a real theme of the second half of the Raine Horne Green Square story, was turning it into systems and processes that meant that he didn't need to be there all the time.
So some of what happened with Dad's business and allowing him to transition was your involvement in the consultancy side to help with the systems and the processes to allow Dad to disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. True? Yeah. But also, I mean, in that particular circumstance, there's very specific property management processes and things like that, which aren't my expertise. And so just holding Dad to that and going, sure, this is a version of pain in your business that doesn't need to be that way. And I don't know who the right person is, but we need to find them. That was the extent to which I helped him with that.
That's wonderful. So there must be a really deep sense of pride in the fact, Michael, that, you know, given how much our fathers and our parents do for us over time, the ability to give back even, you know, a small percentage of what they've given must be. Yeah,
it was. Everything I did with Raine Horne Green Square just felt like such a privilege. It felt like, it was exciting to be building something from scratch in many ways. But also, there was definitely that sense of Dad has given me such an abundance of gifts over the course of my life that it was so nice to kind of package them up and add them to my own experience and then give them back to Dad and, you know, repay him in a small way as well. It was a beautiful thing.
Trevor, what do you think you'd tell other fathers who run businesses who are trying to have a succession plan and wanting to involve the family? You know, what would you tell them?
I think I would certainly still go down the path of building a business that one of your kids could take over, should they want to do that. I have a fundamental problem with assuming that because you love your business and, you know, you think it's amazing and whatever, that one of your kids would necessarily have the same degree of passion and desire to join that industry. So I think that I would set out with a view to, if Michael wanted to take over this business, fantastic, but I wouldn't have, I think I've learnt that you want to see your children succeed in the area that they want to succeed in. So to have that obligation to take over a business because it's the right thing to do, I don't think that, in this day and age, I don't think that's the right way to think. So to answer your question, I think, yes, I would like to think that your child would take over the business, but if they want to go off in a different direction, that's fantastic as well. And as long as, you know, you've imparted some business acumen to them that they can then use in their life to make themselves successful, I think that you've achieved your goal.
And Michael, talk to a young 23-year-old Joe. What would you say to a son that feels an obligation to take on a business perhaps they don't really ready for? Maybe they don't even want to.
I think that, it would be easy for me to say, you know, just like do what's right for you and blah, blah, blah. But there's some very practical, very real challenges you're facing there where it would be, I'd almost say, impossible to not do what you did. So there's no judgment or there's no sense of, I don't want to create this from a theoretical perspective, because the reality is that it would have been very hard to do anything other than what you did. I think the message for me, for anyone who's in that situation, is, to me, it's like a Venn diagram, right? Trev knew he needed that. I'm that. And one obvious way is to go, well, let's just like create the exact same circle, right? I.e. you move into the business. Where's that's it. And so my message is there's a way that the circles aren't together, or there's a way that circles are perfectly in line. But there's also a crossover that you can find where it's like, here's not just what I'm good at, but here's what I want to do. And here's what this business needs. And I think too few people actually explore what that crossover looks like. And it's not always obvious. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't come through conversation either. So a lot of the time it's just about trying stuff and playing around and being okay with the fact that that might not work. You know what? I thought I would be able to help you with this. I can't. One of my favorite business coaching sayings is, if plan A doesn't work, there's 25 other letters in the alphabet. And I think from the point of view of trying to find what that crossover looks like between what I want to do with my life, what my experience is, and how I can help versus what the business needs, we got lucky. Like pretty much where we started in terms of the coaching thing, that was kind of like plan B, having not decided to go into the business. It worked, but had that have not worked, I still think there would have been something that worked. We just would have needed to work at it a little bit and try some things and play around until we found it. But I think there's a curiosity that I would encourage people who were in my situation at the age of 23 to have, which is, I don't know what this ability for me to add value to this business looks like, but I'm not going to find out sitting in a room having a chat. I'm going to roll my sleeves up and have a crack and see what works.
There's a lot to be said for mindset in that whole scenario. Taking and adopting the right mindset will allow you to change and maneuver and evolve to make sure that the role eventually evolves to suit you, or if it does not, give you the courage to make a change.
Joe, can I just add to that? I think it's really important that in a father-son or father-daughter relationship in business, that you're open to taking on new and different ideas. I think I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of business owners that think that their way is the only way, and I've run the business this way for 20 years and I'm not going to... I think you've got to be really open, and I think that Michael would agree that I was extremely open to anything that he put on the table. Doesn't mean to say I implemented everything, but I was extremely open to new and innovative ideas to take our business to the next level, but also more importantly to keep our staff engaged, because they were a young staff and they could, Michael being in that generation could have lots of ideas on how to keep them motivated, how to keep them engaged. We had COVID in the middle of our 5-year plan. That brought a whole new, everyone working from home, working remotely for months on end. That brought a whole different dynamic and challenge to our business. So I think being open to trying new and different things as a business owner, particularly if you've got your kids involved, I think it's really important, because you can't have that, well, I know it all and you know nothing mentality.
Mm-hmm. Guys, this has been an amazing episode for so many different reasons. We've had a perfect succession that you've just realized recently, and a failed family succession that has led to that perfect succession. And I love that. I love that in every sense. You guys have made it work. You've negotiated, you've communicated, you've talked. Your relationship is, sacrosanct. And there's a lot of learnings for people here. And I'm really looking forward to dropping this episode. But before we do leave, I usually ask what your spirit animal would be and why. And I'm going to ask that of Michael. But Trev, given that you're involved in the furniture construction trade, what piece of furniture would you be and why? And maybe while you think about that, Michael can address spirit animal.
If I gave this more thought, I would have a better answer, but I'm just going to keep it pretty simple. I think I'm a little puppy. I get excited very easily, especially when new people come into the room. I like food. I like attention, and I am a direct reflection of the energy of the people around me. So I'm definitely a puppy dog.
And you love it when Abby...
Yes, that's right. Well, Abs loves puppy dogs, and so that's another reason why I'll go with puppy dog.
What about you?
What piece of furniture would I be? A table.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's strong. You sit around it, you eat food, you have drinks, you have family, you have friends, you sit around a table. I think a table's got a lot of uses for engaging and continuing to build and foster relationships and having a great time. So, yeah, a really, really solid, beautiful table.
You have made a question that was very ill thought out. Perfect. Thank you for validating the question.
Joe, look, I'll invite you to the first meal and beer around the table.
Good on you. Look, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's our pleasure. Lovely to see you, Joe.
Thanks so much for having us. That was great.
I hope that this one was enjoyable to listen to and there were some moments of value. If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.